Yeah, yeah. I think we'll give it a couple more minutes and wait for a few more students to join. But like we said, enough students registered that we'll send the recording to as soon as this concludes who couldn't make it because of class conflicts. But I have plenty of questions to ask. So I'm excited to hear your perspective on Goldwater.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's all we've been talking about for the last few days. Did you get to watch the FSU LSU game last weekend?
I did not. The thing that happened, I'm so out of touch with.
Oh, it was a fun one, at least, or at least the most fun we've had in a few years. So
Nice. That's good. Did we win?
we did. We won by one.
Oh,
So
go us. Did you know that FSU has the same colors as BC?
I did, and it's a very nice transition for you because I mean, if people aren't reading closely, all of the garnet or gold gear that you've accrued over the last 4 years, it all kind of still works.
Exactly.
Especially when we play. Wait, are we playing? No, we're playing BC in Tallahassee this year. I was going to say, especially if you got to go to the FSU BC game, like up in.
Yeah, apparently the FSU game is like one of the ones that sells out the most. I was like,
you got Knowles
so
in Boston. Yeah. Well, I'd say let's go ahead and get started. And so we have the pleasure today of having Trystan Loustau join us to talk about her experience applying for the Goldwater Scholarship and other fellowships during her time at Florida State. And so let me briefly introduce Trystan, and then we'll kind of jump right into questions and get going. But Trystan is a first-year social psychology PhD student at Boston College studying moral identity and interventions for bridging social divides. She graduated Summa Cum Laude from Florida State University last spring as a psychology major in the Presidential Scholars Program at Florida State. Trystan is a Goldwater Scholarship recipient, as well as an NSF Graduate Research Fellowship recipient, which is funding her current studies at Boston College. So Trystan, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to speak with you. And so why don't you get us started by talking first about your transition into Florida State University, because as you know, for many students coming in as STEM majors, not all of them know that research is either A, possibility, or B, something that they would be interested in doing. So can you talk a little bit about that transition into Florida State and how research kind of fit into that picture for you?
Yeah, sure. So I began doing undergraduate research pretty much immediately because I was in the Presidential Scholars Program, which requires you to participate in the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program, also known as UROP, which is for first and second year students. You can do research for course credits. You don't have to worry about taking time out of your already busy schedule to like fit research into your time. You just enroll in that class, and then it's like an introduction to research with a colloquium that you meet with people once a week to learn about what research is, the other opportunities to engage in research at FSU. And then you also join a lab or work with a faculty member in some other way, completing a research project to, like get your hands dirty in the research world and learn more about that. So I joined a clinical psychology lab and I really enjoyed it immediately. Research, I took to it very quickly. I was really excited about getting more involved in it. That following summer, I did an internship at a lab at the University of Florida in a different department. It was the computer science department, working in a human computer interaction lab. The following year, I did an IDEA grant and worked in a DIS for a couple of years, and then finished my time doing an undergraduate thesis So research was very much a huge part of my undergraduate experience. And I have to say FSU has like one of the best undergraduate research programs for students, I think, in the country. There's so many opportunities to get involved with research, to fund your research, to receive recognition for your research. And the faculty members are so supportive of like connecting you to their projects, welcoming you into their labs, and then also like helping you apply for external awards and funding and grants. I received a handful of different money from the psychology department to fund my research, from the university at large to fund my research. So many opportunities to get involved. Definitely like take a look. There's no shortage of support there. Yeah, so that's kind of briefly what that looked like for me.
Yeah, I really like hearing like the consistency, throughout from your first year into your second year into your third year. But so for the students that are watching this that are either first or second year students, when you came into Florida State, did you know like this is like what I'm passionate, like this is the research that I want, or was it really the Europe program that really helped facilitate that?
Right. So my research trajectory was a hot mess. I jumped around from wildly different projects pretty much all the way through my undergraduate career, which I was worried would be a weakness in my applications to things like Goldwater and the NSF and graduate school. But it actually has a lot of strengths in many ways. So I joined a Europe project that seemed interesting. Coming in as a psychology major, a lot of people are interested in clinical psychology, so I thought that would be something to consider. I did learn a lot in that lab, gained some valuable skills, but wasn't really sure it was the right fit for me. The method that we used in that lab, using virtual reality to study decision-making, was interesting to me. So the internship that I did that following summer was in a lab similarly at the intersection of psychology and technology, but housed in that computer science department. And it was actually those two projects I focused a lot on in my Goldwater application. And they on the front, they seem very different. One's studying suicide in a clinical psychology lab, and one is studying children's interactive storytelling apps. But you really have to think critically about like why you transition between projects, like how your interests evolved and why they evolved that way, and find common threads between your different experiences, and then kind of create your narrative or your research story like based on those common threads in your application. I moved on to like musical theater projects and like social psychology projects. And, like I was worried, like applying to grad school, like the fact that my research trajectory was so like random, and some people had come in knowing what they wanted to study, like my friend Jessica Dixon knew she wanted to do neuroscience from freshman year, continued in the same neuroscience lab all 4 years, and then now she's in a neuroscience PhD. And sometimes it looks like that, and that's great. And in my case it didn't, but I gained a lot of different experiences and perspectives to consider when doing research, from doing work across different fields and within different subfields in psychology. So there are strengths to however your research trajectory looks. And I would say just let your interests like lead you wherever they lead you. I said yes to pretty much everything, and I don't regret it. So yeah.
I'm really glad that you brought up that perspective, because there are those students that exist that they hit the nail on the head from their freshman year until their senior year, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I think that's pretty uncommon. And so what I remember, what I did really like about your application when you applied was its intersectionality. I'm currently working with a student that has some concerns about how vast their interests are. And so I think something to really reemphasize with Goldwater is that they are looking for undergraduate researchers. They're not looking for, and so they're looking to celebrate that research. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up, because we've had recipients that are now doing graduate study or research completely like aside from the research that they presented for the Goldwater Scholarship. So I appreciate you touching on that.
Yeah, I think I said that I wanted to go into media psychology, and I was really emphasizing like my programming skills and statistics background, but that was just for the purposes of this application. And unlike the NSF, the degree that you put on the Goldwater application is not the degree you were forced to one day obtain. So yeah, I would just, and this is actually a valuable skill in, applying to research grants in the future, is you have to curate a story that fits really well with the application that you're applying for. So even if you think your interests might change in the future, or maybe they already have, and the project you're working on doing next is different from the ones you've done before, it's okay. Like, just tell your story authentically, but also in a way that fits with the purposes of the application.
Yeah, because I think that's a really great transition into some of the more technical questions that I had about like the Goldwater application process. And so first, can you talk a little bit about what was most challenging about the application? Because you have to balance a lot of different things in the Goldwater. So not just from the research proposal, but you have multiple personal, like short essays, as well as the application itself, which is a extremely deconstructed resume. But just thinking about all of that, what was maybe uniquely challenging for you, but then maybe what did you feel like was a little bit easier for you when you were starting to kind of get into the thick of it?
Yeah, probably the most challenging is what for me was trying to synthesize all of the different things that I had done that in my mind were polar opposites, into like a coherent story. So filling out the application, basically the purpose is to, one, outline your research interest about a certain topic, potentially a human issue that you're trying to tackle with your research project. And two, describing how your specific background and experiences and skills are well suited to pursuing that topic. And so those are tackled in like the personal career statement at the beginning, and then the research essay at the end. And then the experiences that you highlight in that deconstructed resume portion in the middle should, kind of contribute to that. Yeah, so I think like through my meetings with you, like I think we met like once a week for 1 or 2 months, like talking through that and like doing some reflecting on how those experiences fit together, and like identifying a specific issue that kind of was at the intersection between technology and psychology, to kind of bridge those projects together, and then figuring out what project in that intersection I wanted to outline for the research project proposal. Yeah, I think that was the most challenging. The easier parts, I guess. I mean, it was relatively easy filling out the resume portion, based on what I had done. I want to talk a little bit about like the diversity statement, because I feel like I learned a lot about how to write a diversity statement through the Goldwater application. That's something that is required or optional, but often on other fellowship applications, on graduate school applications. And I feel like a lot of people approach the diversity statement as like, oh, here they just want to know what challenges I've faced as X person from X background. And that's true, but you shouldn't end there. You should also outline how you've either overcome those challenges, or how you are motivated by those challenges to create change, to better address them. Like, for example, in my Goldwater application, I focused on being a woman in STEM fields. I talked about being in programming classes for my minor at FSU that were male dominated, and the subtle barriers that are encompassed within that. Listed some statistics about representation of women in STEM and that sort of thing. But then I also talked about serving as a year op leader for class. My class was all women that were interested in doing research, and striving to be a good mentor towards my students, and the positive role models that I had as a woman in STEM at FSU, like seeing women PIs in research labs, and then looking forward in my career, outlining the goal of being a mentor to future students that I would teach at a university, or recruit in my lab. So I think that was uniquely, like, I thought it would be easy, but then it turned out to be more challenging, and I feel like I learned a lot of really valuable information about how to craft that part of applications.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think in not just fellowship applications, but in graduate school applications or med school applications or whatever it may be, whenever they say the essay is optional, I feel like they kind of mean you should do it, or try to say something. Uh,
Right.
and so I like how you also recognized being a woman in STEM, but then also kind of turned the prompt on its head and talked about how you have then been advocating for women in STEM and working with others, and like kind of pushing that issue forward to address it. And so I think that was a really clever way to approach the essay, and I think it read very well.
Yeah.
Something else that students often find intimidating about not just the Goldwater application, but a lot of STEM fellowships or just fellowships in general, is the letters of recommendation and building connections with faculty, especially because, as you know, sophomores, you're eligible to apply for Goldwater, and a lot of students that apply earlier maybe haven't yet built those relationships, those professional relationships with faculty yet. So can you talk a little bit about how you built these professional relationships with faculty and with professors at Florida State, and any advice that you would have for a student who maybe is in their first year, or who may be at the start of their second year, who's maybe still firmly in the midst of that process?
Yeah. If I remember correctly, I think I got my 3 recommendation letters from the PI that was overseeing the lab that I did for Europe, who I actually like rarely interacted with directly. Usually for those sorts of projects, if you're just like an RA, if you're not doing a DIS or a thesis, you're mainly working with the graduate students, and then they tell the PI like how well you did, and then they craft a letter based on that information, which is perfectly fine. Like I think I got a perfectly strong letter from that, even if you're not directly interacting with the PI. If you're doing good work in the lab with the graduate students, it works out. I think the other letter was from the internship that I did over the summer. So that was from a person not at FSU, which I was worried would be tricky, but I think it turned out fine. And then the other one was from just one of my professors. I had taken 2 classes with him through the honors program. So I spoke up in class, was an active participant in course discussions about the topics. And it kind of was like loosely related to the project that I was proposing. So I, chose him. If I hadn't have done like many concrete research experiences, I would definitely recommend going to office hours. For latter applications, I think for maybe one of my graduate applications, I needed another recommendation letter that I didn't really have someone for. So I just started going to her office hours for one of my classes and like talking to her, asking follow-up questions about the topics that we were discussing, or even just topics related to research or psychology or whatever field that you're in general. And they love that. Like they love you like being more engaged in the topic, showing a willingness to like go beyond the classroom expectations and like talk to them after class. And you don't need to do that like every week, but like at least a handful of times I think is good to establish a solid rapport. And you try to, even if it's a big lecture class, maybe consider at the front and ask a few questions, or try to be a little bit more active in the class. Yeah, I would recommend. I mean, I know that's what everyone recommends, but it really does work. Like, it's a great way to get to know the professor and establish a rapport beyond just being in their class.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, be willing to sit down with them, not just in office hours, like Trystan was saying, but if they're, when asking for a letter, feel free to say, like, if you have any questions, like, I would love to answer those. I would love to sit down and talk about this one-on-one. And something else that I believe you did during your application, Trystan, was also sit down with your faculty. So not just like with our, but going over your essay.
Yeah, I had one of my mentors at the time read through my research proposal, because like the feedback from the Office of National Fellowships is great for like, like formatting, like making sure it's like, it reads like a strong narrative and makes sense. But as far as like the technical research aspects, finding a good advisor that can help you make sure it's, you're proposing strong methodology and like asking good questions, and if it's a good like contribution to that space of research, that's a great opportunity to one, like get good feedback on your application, but also work with that faculty and build a strong rapport if you don't already have one with them. Yeah.
As much as I would love to be a social psychologist or a computer scientist, that is not my background, and my tech competency is very low. So yes, definitely always recommend in addition to meeting with our office, also sitting with someone that does have the technical field knowledge, like Trystan was saying, that can give you that level of advice. And the last question I really had about the application process itself was in thinking about congruency between your research essay, your extracurricular involvement, the short essays, and was that a challenge for you when you were like crafting the application, or when did you start to see how maybe all of your experiences you started to intersect, if you felt like they did?
Yeah. So like when you're trying to think about how your experiences all fit together, like they might all be in the same field on the same topic, and that's great. If they're not in the same field, like maybe they're in fields that commonly like work together, are they cross-disciplinary? Or is the methodology of one of your experiences similar to the topic of another? That was the case for me with the clinical psychology lab that used virtual reality. So they used a technological method, even though what they were studying was, psychological decision-making. And that's how I connected that project to the work I did in the computer science lab that actually researched technology directly with children's interactive storytelling applications. I didn't build on either of those for my study, but I kind of highlighted the general fact that I was interested in research at the intersection between technology and psychology. Even though those intersections look different for those projects, it basically provided a background of like why I was interested in that topic, different sets of skills. So if you do have different experiences, you can highlight the variety of skill sets that you've gained from those experiences, and that shows that you're a more well-rounded researcher. And so the project I proposed didn't have anything to do with those projects, but it was at the same intersection across the same like two fields, relating more to psychology and the impact of technology on everyday life. But I kind of started building those threads, and then once you kind of identify like that general story of how your background relates to what you're interested in now, that's where you can really start pinpointing the details of the specific project that you want to propose, and start like identifying the specific methods and plan for your study.
I apologize. I accidentally lied to you. I do have one more question about the application.
Okay, go for it.
Because I think this is still really important, and my understanding is that it's still going to be reflected in this application, because for the last 2 cycles, just like the diversity question, which is optional, there was also an optional question regarding COVID and perhaps opportunities lost because of the pandemic or labs being closed, and that impacted you as a college student because of virtual learning. So, but now for students that are coming in, I think the impact is more felt during like their junior or senior year of high school, when, in reflecting, on yours or my high school experience, was when we were heavily involved in community service, or some were involved in research, or, dual enrollment, or these other opportunities. So for students who may have felt like some of those opportunities were lost, like how would you advise them to now, as freshmen, as sophomores, to maybe try to find some of those experiences maybe they felt like they were missing, so they might have something to say when it comes to that short response? Does that, I know that was wordy, but does that kind of make sense?
As far as like how to get involved in research,
finding involved, like, say if they're not in Europe, or maybe finding involvement in their field, how would you recommend them going about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of like bodies you can go to, like the Center for, the CRE. They have a lot of on their website, they have a lot of resources available. You can go to your department website and see what faculty are accepting like volunteers in their lab. If you just want to like informally start getting experience working in a lab, volunteering is a great way to start. So you don't have to like enroll in course credit if you're not ready for that commitment. or, do like a larger program like UROP or Idea Grant or whatnot. I would recommend, like, even if you haven't completed the project of like doing an Idea Grant or UROP project or whatever, if you're like applying or, even just starting out while completing the Goldwater application, I still think it's like valuable to mention whatever experience that you do have. I mean, there's some student groups, I don't know how like active they still are. I was on SCIRC. I don't really know if that still exists, but there are like certain venues for undergraduate students. Like we have the OWL for publishing research. That doesn't have to look like an official project that you did, outside of class. It can be like a class research project that you did. Like, actually, that's a great point. Like research that you did within a class, even if you didn't complete an official program or worked in a lab officially, I'm sure like you've had at least some experience writing a research paper for one of your classes, or doing something like that. If you took a research methods class yet for your STEM major, I'm sure you had to do some sort of research project. So if you don't have like, an official experience to mention, you can always like draw from those experiences in your application.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, because I believe it was spring of your junior year when you found out that you were nominated for Goldwater.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I was the second year of it. Yeah.
Because I wanted to ask, like, one, what was the impact of that nomination? Just for you personally or in relation to your research? And then was it that following summer that you had your Idea Grant experience? And so can you kind of walk us through that timeline, both what it meant to be nominated, but then did that impact your summer or the research you were doing later in any way?
Yeah. So Goldwater is great to have on your application, especially for like the more traditional STEM fields. Psychology is like, it's officially recognized as STEM, but I don't think Goldwater is as well known as like things like the NSF GRFP in the field, as I've come to learn when talking to people in grad school. But it does come with a $7,500 like financial package each year, following the year you were offered the award. I didn't receive any money because I already had a full ride. But if you do have extra need that's not already being covered by another scholarship, then it will like provide that for you, which is great support. So you can spend more time, on research instead of like working a part-time job, if that's a concern for you. Yeah, I will say like probably the best way it benefited me was it provided me practice in completing a personal statement and a research proposal, which, I use definitely as like a template for my NSF GRFP application the following year, which, I was successful in applying for. If you're not already familiar with the NSF GRFP, I'm sure the Office of National Fellowships, if they haven't already, will have like a talk about it soon. But it's a very prestigious award for graduate school, funds your first 3 years. It makes you very competitive in the application cycle. And completing Goldwater definitely helped me to like already have the skill set of synthesizing my background and my skills and what I'm interested in and why I'm well suited to my study of choice. And then like outlining concrete research ideas that I'm interested in, and the diversity statement as well. Practice writing that was very beneficial. I didn't actually end up doing the project that I proposed, which is fine. I definitely think like throughout completing all these applications, just like outlining a research proposal and like thinking about your questions and what methods are best suited to answering those questions and the proposed data analysis. Like it's great exercise in getting familiar with the research process and, actually like creating a plan for your own ideas and how you would begin to tackle those in a research investigation. So even if you don't end up completing the project, which you might, like if you find a good advisor to, do it with, that's a great launching point. But even if not, there are definitely like valuable skills from the process alone.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of really great things, and Javon, I see that your hand is up, and I want to make sure that we get to your question too. But a couple things just to reemphasize is that psychology, yes, it is recognized for Goldwater, but I think what also really helped your application was that intersectionality, like we said, between computer science and psychology. I think that offered a unique layer. But also want to reemphasize that one, when it comes to like recruiting other presidential scholars or other students who have the scholarship funding, because Goldwater is a bit of a unique experience in that it does not provide you a research experience like an REU does, or what some of these other, like a Dodd-Rise or some of these other STEM fellowships. It's purely recognition. And so it can be hard to recruit when students may think, well, I don't need the scholarship funding, so why would I take the time to apply for something that's going to be purely but like you mentioned, it is a great boost to your resume, but it also provides you some excellent practice as a sophomore or junior to prepare your writing chops, for some of these really prestigious opportunities as a, spring of your junior year or into your sophomore year. And so I really appreciate you touching on those things.
Yeah.
But Javon, if you would like to unmute yourself, please feel free to ask a question that you have, or if it's easier to type it in the chat, by all means.
Hi, I'm sorry. My name is Jovan Victor. I'm a second-year student here at Florida State University, and I had a question for you. I was wondering, did preparing for Goldwater help you prepare for getting your undergraduate thesis and then figure out a way to get funding for said undergrad thesis from either the IDEA grants or whichever programs here at NFSU or anything national? Because I feel like I technically don't qualify because I'm economics, but I was wondering if it did help practice, because I'm looking forward to doing my own undergraduate thesis and finding funding for it.
Yeah. So for both your thesis and the idea grant, you have to outline like a project proposal the same way you would for Goldwater. So I definitely think that those skills are transferable. And then I would say, like, in my experience, the more work you do like around the CRE and ONF, like the more you become familiar with these other programs and opportunities and connected to like that undergraduate research community. So like it's, it can't hurt you. It can only help you. So yeah, I would definitely say it helped me practice, writing that research proposal, the personal statement for, acquiring funding from the IDEA grant, and preparing for the undergraduate thesis. Like every research experience or application that I filled out just only strengthened my skills for then, completing my undergraduate thesis at the end. So yeah, I would definitely say so.
And Javon, I want to double check for you because I'm looking under their eligible fields, because economics is definitely eligible for the NSF GRFP that Trystan is talking about. But I want to double check, and I know we're actually meeting later today, so we can talk about it then. But I want to make sure that how we might classify, if you are involved in research or you do plan to get involved in research, how we may classify that, because based on how it may be classified, it could be one of those like fringe sciences that may or may not be eligible for Goldwater. So I do want to check with you on that. Good question. But Trystan, so I know we've been, mostly talking about Goldwater, and so obviously I do not expect this to be the answer because you've been heavily involved during your time at Florida State. But now that you're a graduate student, and in reflecting on your undergraduate experience, what was like or if you can't really pin it down to one singular experience, like what were the most important experiences or involvements that you think prepared you for graduate school and the PhD program that you're now a part of?
Yeah, I mean, really everything. Like, I feel like I gained something valuable from every single thing that I did, even the things that were so far, like the musical theater paper that I wrote for a journal. Like, I gained writing experience and experience with the publication process. The projects that I've done like since freshman year have varied widely, but I think I gained unique skills from each of them. That I argued like in my graduate school applications, are very relevant to even like general skills like writing ability, applying for grants. That's one way it connects, or, experience doing different types of data analysis for different projects, different like programming skills I had no idea would be so valuable to my graduate school career. But it's just this past week I was teaching myself R, and it was because of my minor in programming that I was able to pick it up so quickly. And so it's been, everything that I did in undergraduate research was, definitely helpful. Even if, my degree now is in social psychology, a lot of the projects I did were not related to social psychology at all. They provided me with very valuable skills, and like with the NSF GRFP, that made me, more competitive in the application processes. And so, that was based on a lot of the previous applications that I had applied for in practice, like applying for awards and that sort of thing, helped me to do well in that application, made me more competitive for graduate school. So I'm in a really great program now. A lot of it thanks to receiving that award. Yeah, so I can't really pinpoint one experience, but I would just say generally, like, get involved with research as soon as possible, and continue, exploring different topics. Or if you like fall in love with one, like continue in that lab, like build a relationship with that lab. And yeah, I mean, take advantage of all, like FSU has so many resources for undergraduate students, like take advantage of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's, like you said, it's never too early to get involved in research. Like I talk to students that sometimes feel like they're behind the curve because they didn't start research in their very first semester. And that's just simply, that's so rare that students get involved in even their first, or, even in the start of their second year. And so to clarify, to clarify, for the Goldwater Scholarship, you can apply with a project you're currently in the midst of. You can apply with a project that you've fully completed. You can apply with a project that you are about to start, as long as you have an idea for what that project would look like. And so if that can occur in your second or your third year, wherever you fall on that spectrum, you can be eligible for the application. And even if you don't receive it, there's still a lot, like Trystan has alluded to, there are a lot of benefits in just growing as a writer and really synthesizing your undergraduate experience that can then later be applied towards other opportunities and awards. Javon, did you have another question?
Yes, I was wondering about how during their summers when you were, looking for internships, looking for research, how did you find things that worked for you in helping you progress your research? Because right now I'm in a situation where I'm trying to find internships, but most of the internships I'm finding are like business related or corporate related, or finding a job in the corporate world. Nothing that deals with policy or research and that focus on my interests like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there, I would say a number of things. You can talk to some of your professors in your economics classes and ask them what colleagues they know that are studying those things that you're interested in. And so with the internship that I've been referencing that I did after my freshman year, I literally just cold emailed a bunch of different faculty across the country whose research that I found interesting, and was like, hi, like, I'm interested in your research. Like, could I potentially complete an internship in your lab this summer? And some of them responded, and one of them was like, yeah, let's set up an interview. And she accepted me into the lab. It was an unpaid position, but I've heard of people, like cold emailing and getting paid for an opportunity they basically created themselves. So I would say you don't always have to go through an officially structured program. There are a number of great programs like REUs and a lot of summer opportunities that are official, but you can create opportunities just by cold emailing professors and, expressing interest. And they're often like really excited to see like, oh, this random student is interested in my work. So don't be afraid to just like cold email. It worked for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised how often that it does work out. It's funny because I'm actually working with a student now that's interested in Goldwater who wasn't accepted into the Europe program, but just emailed a few labs and has already have like a couple interviews to get involved. And so be confident in yourself. And I'm always happy to read over any emails you may want to send, if emailing a faculty member does sound scary. I promise you they're human too, and they were exactly where you are currently at one point in their career. But any other questions, Javon, that you have for Trystan?
I was wondering how, seems like you switched different topics of research. I was wondering how you like overall connected your previous research to your current research to your graduate applications, because graduate school is a goal of mine that I'm interested in.
Yeah, so in the graduate application specifically, the way that it looks usually is like you spend like a paragraph maybe on like each experience, and you highlight like briefly like what the work was about, the skills that you gained from it, and potentially like what research interests it inspired in you. And so you can do it chronologically, like here's what I did freshman year, sophomore year, junior, senior year. Or you can do it, I think I did it more in terms of like how related the topics were. So I started with like my work that was a little bit of a stretch out with like the musical theater stuff and the computer science stuff, and then like working more towards like the psychology stuff at the end, to try to create like, oh, I was, interested in a lot of different things. And then my research interest narrowed. So you can start with the broad upside down pyramid of like broad interests, exploring research, generally just like enthusiastic about getting involved in different projects. And then here's how my research interest narrowed over time, even if that's not exactly chronologically, which it might be too. And so you can highlight skills that are relevant to what you're interested in. You can highlight methods that you found interesting, even if what the topic they were actually studying is not interesting to you. Maybe the method they used to study it was interesting. Like for me, I was a part of an organization that used field research methods, applied research methods to study something. And even if the topic wasn't exactly what I want to study in graduate school, that method is still interesting to me. So you can highlight those sorts of things. Like maybe if it contributes to society, to some sector of society. I mean, there's lots of like different little ways you can be like, this is how it's relevant to what I'm interested in now, skills, methodology, that sort of thing. Yeah, does that answer your question? Cool.
Yes, it does, because I'm like wanting to get my graduate degree, like master's in urban planning, and go into a joint program with law. And I was just wondering how I can base off like my research and conclude it to what I want to do in the said future, because a lot of them are just like, oh, I'm internet law firm, I'm doing this, but I'm just like here, like, no, I'd rather do research instead.
Yeah, I would say like in my experience, like PIs or faculty or professors, like they don't expect you to have done the exact research that you're interested in like pursuing in graduate school. Like even if your experiences are unrelated, like it's really in the interview, like where you can, if you can just like elucidate what you're interested in, they don't care if like your experiences aren't like directly related to that. But if you can coherently, elaborately like show knowledge of like that topic a little bit or interested in it, and can like eloquently describe, your research interests, you don't have to have real experience to support them. Yeah, so I would just say like keep that in mind. Like don't feel like you can't pursue graduate study in something unless you've already done research in it in undergraduate. Yeah.
And last question. A lot of people, when I'm thinking about talking about applying for graduate school, they're always like, what's your story? What's your theme? What is your one thing that it's around, you revolve around? And I was just wondering, well, it's a lot of different things. How did you put it together, like bring it all together to have like a main idea, main focus?
Yeah. So you want to like be referencing the same like research interests throughout. So like at the beginning, you can be like, I'm interested in studying this, and then you can go into your background, and then the end. And again, I'm interested in studying this. And like ideally you want to kind of build towards that thing. Yeah, it is tricky when you have like a lot of different experiences to synthesize it together. I would just say like, just like tell the story, like how it happened for you and like how your research interest evolved. And it's like you can spend more time on the things that are more relevant and just like kind of, base it that way, like spend less time on things that are less relevant, but still mention them since they're like valuable experiences. You can focus less on the topics of what you study and more on like the skills that you gain from them. Because you're not just presenting your research interests, you're also presenting your skills and like what you would offer like to the graduate program as a student, as a researcher. And so like just highlighting the skills, I think is a very practical way to like make the application still strong, even if it's an indirectly related experience.
Yeah, I think that's really fantastic advice. Especially because when it comes to Goldwater, they care less that you continue with the same project and in the same field from your sophomore year and all the way in through graduate. What they care more about is like Trystan is saying, that you're committed to a career in research, whatever that field may be. And so always make sure, like Trystan said, highlight those specific skills and what you gleaned from these different experiences, because if you can learn that in this lab over here, then it can be assumed that you're going to take those skills and apply it towards this new lab over here, whether you are in, the hard STEM sciences, or if you're in economics, or in, some of these other like mathematical or like computer science like fields. And so it's that transferability that a lot of these scholarships are looking for. And that kind of leads me into, and I know we're running a little short on time. And so maybe in thinking about how a Goldwater application cycle could transition into something like the NSF GRFP or an NSF REU or a DOT RISE or one of these other applications. Can you speak a little bit to, because with the GRFP, they have like two main review criteria, both academic merit, which is, okay, so what are the lab experiences? What are the awards you receive? What are da. But they're also looking at broader impacts, which is kind of a bit of a nebulous term. Can you talk a little bit about how you navigated during your senior year, all of the experiences you had in undergrad and in the GRFP application? How did you take your research and define it in those terms and in those broader impact terms, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So just to provide like some more context. So like the academic merit both includes like, like the research, project and everything, but also like your personal like skills and like research experiences and, success as a student. And then like the broader impact is like how the research contributes to society, but also like your personal experiences, like, giving back to it. So for example, I, in the broader impact section, talked both about like how my research contributes to society, but also about like my work as a student leader in the undergraduate research space, as a year op leader, as, on SCIRC, as the editor-in-chief of the OWL, different like leadership positions that I held like in labs that I worked with, or in organizations, and like how through those positions I work to make research more accessible to students and, just generally to get more students involved with research and, help other students be successful in their research endeavors. And yeah, so I actually scored really highly on the broader impacts compared to the academic merit. And I mean, it's a bit easier for, I feel like, a field like psychology to be able to elucidate the broader impacts, because like for my project, I think I was directly studying like how disease aversion related to the COVID pandemic can contribute to racism towards Asian Americans. And so it was very clearly like, okay, we can help end racism with this project. Like it's a very clear social impact. Yeah, so I mean, I guess if you're struggling a little bit to think about that, you can talk to your PI. So like, okay, as I'm mentioning that, you can clearly see that it's not related to any of the previous projects that I've mentioned for that application, but like I guess in each of the projects that I did, like I could see different ways they, contributed to whatever need that, in that, either contributing to knowledge in the research field themselves or contributing more directly to a social issue. So I mean, it can look like both. Like you can be contributing to a space in the field that's not well studied, and you're, increasing, knowledge about that topic. But I think more powerful is when you can go beyond that to talk about what human need or societal project or problem are you addressing, like with your project. It's even more important. I think maybe why I scored highly is because I think my project design was twofold, where one was understanding the mechanism and concept, and the second one was proposing an intervention for using the knowledge that would have been gained in the first project to actively trying to reduce discrimination using that information in the second project. So you can be more intentional about how you're crafting your methodology to directly, relate to the broader impacts in that way. But even if not, like, just you can talk to your advisor about how this project fits in the grand scheme of things and that sort of thing. I hope that answered the question.
No, it did. I think it really emphasizes the importance of celebrating all of the experiences that you've had. And these applications aren't looking for one singular thing. I think being able to show that the intersection of your interests, being able to show your extracurricular involvement outside of like all of these experiences are important, both in the Goldwater application or throughout your time at FSU and some of the other opportunities you may apply for. And so I really appreciate that about your application, and especially now in kind of making meaning of your undergraduate experience. I think that's extremely valuable to our students. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to share all of that with us.
Yeah.
And so again, Javon, thank you so much for being here. And I know this is going to be an extremely valuable resource to the other students that we'll be working with over the course of this application cycle. And so we'll be sure to share this interview with all of them so they can hear your insight. And hopefully we can have you and some of our other wonderful Goldwater alumni, Jessica, join us in the near future, especially if y'all are roommates. I think we might have to take advantage of that sometime within the next year. But Trystan, thank you so much again for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Trystan.
Yeah.
But we look forward to talking with you soon, and have a wonderful.
Yeah, you guys too. Best of luck, Javon, on your application.
Yeah.